All right, let's dive right into what has to be the most brilliantly absurd financial case study I've ever seen. Today's explainer focuses on the absolutely wild tale of Bartholomew Ghastly. Now, Bartholomew is an immortal, fear-generating entity who spent over 400 years lurking in the shadows. But today, he's facing a terror way worse than anything he's ever unleashed on humanity, the crushing, beige reality of modern bureaucracy. We're going to look at his situation through a strictly financial lens, and honestly, the parallels to our own modern economy are as hilarious as they are terrifying.
$847,293.58. Just let that sink in for a second. That staggering number is the exact amount the IRS claims Bartholomew owes in back taxes, penalties, and interest. According to their notice of tax delinquency, our monster has maintained continuous residency under the bed at his assigned department since January 1982, generating what the IRS coldly classifies as fear-based revenue. See, for 42 years, Bartholomew was operating completely outside the cash economy. He kind of just assumed he was immune to human laws. Yeah, he was very, very wrong.
As our protagonist quickly and painfully realizes, you can't mess with the taxmen. I mean, think about it. Bartholomew survived the Inquisition, he survived the Black Death, he literally even survived the Disney Channel's whole rehabilitation of monster reputations. But nobody, and I mean nobody, escapes the IRS Special Entities Division. That's a department apparently dedicated entirely to auditing ghosts, demons, and, other supernatural beings. It's a massive, rude awakening that sets him off on this frantic quest for infernal accounting help.
Section 1. The Gig Economy Nightmare, when monsters work for platform capitalism.
So Bartholomew's tax problem isn't just a matter of him, forgetting to file. It's actually a super harsh reality check about who he really works for. For over 40 years, the guy believed he was a loyal employee, officially assigned to a specific spot under the bed by the Boogeyman himself. But when his tiny demon accountant, whose name is Ace, by the way, calls HR, they uncover the truth. Bartholomew isn't a W-2 employee with benefits and tax withholding. Nope, he is an independent contractor. Turns out, the Boogeyman is actually just an LLC doing business as a gig economy platform called, wait for it, ScareBnB.
And honestly, this right here brilliantly illustrates the absolute dark comedy of platform capitalism. ScareBnB operates exactly like any modern rideshare or app-based service. The company neatly avoids all liability and tax withholding simply by classifying its monsters as independent contractors. So you might be wondering, how on earth did Bartholomew agree to this? Well, through a 1982 click-wrap agreement that he passively accepted just by, doing his job. All of his 1099 tax forms were sent to a corporate email address he never even knew existed, mostly because, well, he didn't exactly know what email was back in 1982.
Section 2. Deducting Existential Dread, the Absurd Audit.
Now, because Bartholomew is an independent contractor, he is on the hook for a massive self-employment tax bill. But to try and reduce that hit, he and Ace have to reconstruct 42 years of deductions. And we really have to treat these numbers with deadpan seriousness here because the IRS certainly does. Look at this, an 18-square-foot home office deduction for the space exclusively used under the bed. We've got $52 a year for claw maintenance, which they treat as tool upkeep. There is literally even equipment depreciation, a 70-year straight-line depreciation for his custom Terra claws. It is wild. It perfectly mirrors the insane lengths real-world corporations go to minimize their taxable income, just mapped onto a creature of the night.
But here's a fun question. How do you pay a demon accountant when you don't actually have human money? You use supernatural economics. Bartholomew pays Ace using literally the only currency he has, authentic first-hand memories of the Black Death from the 14th century. Because apparently, there's a huge niche market in hell for full sensory historical suffering. Ace values these memories at $5,000 a pop, which actually allows Bartholomew to legitimately deduct $30,000 in professional accounting fees.
Furthermore, any business has a cost of goods sold, right? COGS. Well, for Bartholomew, his raw materials are human nightmares. To generate fear, he actually has to maintain his physical manifestation, which means he has to absorb the ambient energy of roughly 365 nightmares a year. By strictly defining his inventory like this, Ace successfully argues that Bartholomew's constant presence under the bed isn't just, loitering. It is a strict, undeniable operational necessity for acquiring the raw materials of his trade.
Section 3. A failing fear business, the economics of obsolescence.
As Ace crunches the numbers, a much sadder financial reality starts to emerge about market obsolescence. Bartholomew isn't just a tax evader, he's actually operating a fundamentally broken business model. Back in 1982, Bartholomew's assigned client, Jimmy, was 10 years old. Monsters were peak fear. But as Jimmy grew up, his fears naturally shifted. By 1997, Jimmy was terrified of student loans, finding a job, hitting adult milestones. By 2012, Jimmy was entirely preoccupied with cholesterol and mortgages. The primal dread that Bartholomew generated was completely replaced by mundane, everyday adult anxieties.
So his revenue, it plummeted right off a cliff. Back in 1982, charging around $100 an hour for high-quality psychological terror, Bartholomew grossed an estimated $250,000. But as Jimmy aged and completely stopped being afraid of the dark, Bartholomew's gross income dropped to absolute zero. And because his fixed expenses, things like depreciation and those home office costs, remained constant, Bartholomew has basically been operating a failing zombie company at a massive loss for over a decade now.
And honestly, what makes this whole situation so compelling is how this obsolescence is mirrored right back in the human world. Jimmy, who is now 52 years old and facing some brutal restructuring at his own corporate job, puts it perfectly. Experience is just another word for old and expensive. It hits the nail right on the head. Both the monster and the man are facing the exact same existential crisis here. They're aging, their very specific skills are no longer valued by the market, and they are both absolutely terrified of being replaced by a younger, more efficient world. But amidst all this cold, hard financial accounting, Ace uncovers something surprisingly poignant. On March 15, 2019, the night Jimmy's father died, Bartholomew deliberately stayed silent just to let Jimmy grieve in peace. Ace immediately categorizes this as compassionate fear generation cessation, which is an unbilled service they treat as a tax-deductible charitable contribution. It really proves that despite being a literal creature of terror, Bartholomew has developed a deep 42-year emotional attachment to his one and only client.
Which brings us to the climax of the whole ordeal. To file for an individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN, Bartholomew has to do the unthinkable. He literally has to emerge from the darkness, confess his 4 decades of tax evasion, and basically beg his middle-aged client for help navigating IRS bureaucracy just to verify his identity and residency.
And when he finally does it, Jimmy doesn't even scream. He just laughs at the sheer absurdity of the whole thing. The two of them actually form this unlikely bond over their shared irrelevance in a changing economy. Jimmy signs the paperwork, and through some heavy deductions and operating loss carryforwards, Ace manages to negotiate the final liability down to $341,247.89, with a completely brutal payment plan of $5,000 a month. So this leaves Bartholomew at a massive crossroads. Does he abandon his decades-long post to go find a new, profitable child to scare? Or does he figure out a way to pivot his business model without leaving the only home he knows? To wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If the monster under the bed is really just another independent contractor caught in the merciless gears of platform capitalism, what are you actually afraid of? This brilliant case study uses supernatural accounting to remind us of one undeniable truth. In the modern world, the crushing, inescapable weight of taxes, bureaucracy, and irrelevance is vastly scarier than any creature lurking in the dark. Thanks for tuning in, and hey, remember, always check those terms and conditions.